What's up, everyone? Welcome to another UFC Quick Picks here on the Mayo Media Network. We have UFC 307 this weekend. Alex Pereira versus Rountree Jr. in the main event. 2 title fights on the line, 12 fights in total on this slate. As always, I'm here to give you my favorite cash game play, tournament play, salary play, and a matchup I like on the DraftKings slate. And let's just get right into it with my favorite cash game play of the week. That's going to be Raquel Pennington at 8.4K. Unfortunately or not, I think the co-main event here is one of the biggest priorities on the slate, given the 5-round potential. Pennington is a near minus 170 favorite against Juliana Pena as the current champion. More importantly, though, like Pennington is coming off a pretty boring, grinding decision win against Mayra Bueno Silva in her last 5-round fight that scored her 145 DraftKings points. And I don't necessarily think she's going to duplicate that or that she needs to duplicate that. But she's fighting an opponent in Juliana Pena who doesn't have a lot of process. Pena doesn't really defend strikes super well, and she's defending takedowns at 23%. Pennington can threaten her, and I also don't mind playing Pena in cash. I think stacking this fight makes sense depending on the construction you want. But Pennington, I think, is the better minutes winner, is going to be the one to box at a higher rate, probably going to be the better wrestler, the better control fighter, the one more likely to end up in top position, and she's just very tough. Pennington's very difficult to finish, good cardio. The fight's projected to go the full distance, minus 230, so Pennington at 8.4K, I think, has a really strong floor and a really strong ceiling, and a very strong price, an easy price tag to pay in cash games. I really like this co-main event in general on this DraftKings slate, and Pennington is going to be a cash game priority for me at 8.4K. All right, my tournament play of the week. This one is actually really difficult because there aren't a lot of fighters who rate out well from a fantasy perspective this week. I do want to talk about Yasmin Lucindo a little bit at 8.6K. She's fighting Marina Rodriguez in what's a step up in competition for her. I'm not even fully convinced that Lucindo will win this fight because Rodriguez is a really strong Muay Thai striker. She's effective in the clinch. She throws a lot of volume. This is a good test for Lucindo, who's only 22 years old and has looked great in her young UFC career, but it's still a step up and there's still risk in that regard. What I like about Lucindo is that she has averaged 2.6 takedowns per win in her last 3 wins. And now she's fighting Marina Rodriguez, who gives up a lot of takedowns and struggles to get back up from her back. Rodriguez does a good job at defending submissions, and she's very difficult to finish, but she's pretty ineffective at defending takedowns, and she's pretty ineffective at getting back up to her feet. So Lucindo, knowing Rodriguez is a high-volume striker, and Lucindo can probably compete with Rodriguez on the feet too, but Lucindo's definitely going to have an advantage on the ground. I think she's going to attempt takedowns. I think she's going to land takedowns. And I think there's a world in which she lands several takedowns over 3 rounds, earns a lot of control time, and that carries her to a 90 to 100 point score at 8.6K, which could be enough for the optimal on this slate. This range is really difficult because there's all these fights are projected to go the distance with minimal grappling equity and, minimal finishing equity too. So I'm not sure that we get many standout options in this 8K range, and I think a lot of people will go stars and scrubs for that reason, which I don't mind, but Lucindo to me is a semi-standout in that she actually does have grappling upside in her game, and she's fighting an opponent in Rodriguez who defends takedowns poorly and struggles to get back up from her feet. So Lucindo doesn't rate out very well with a plus, I have to pull it up actually. She's minus 194 to win now. She's been getting bet up a little bit. She's only plus 315 to win inside the distance, so the concern is that in a decision, Lucindo doesn't reach the optimal lineup, but I do think the fact that she has grappling equity in this matchup at least gives her a hope for a moderate floor and a moderate ceiling, and she's someone who I'm willing to play personally there at 8.6K. All right, next up, my salary play of the week. I'm going to go out on a limb here and talk about Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who's fighting Joaquin Buckley. I think Buckley is going to be very popular, and I understand why. I mean, Buckley's a really strong power striker, and he's had a bunch of impressive recent wins. He's won 4 in a row, and he's also landing takedowns here and there. He's landed 2, 2, and 4 takedowns in his last 4 wins. And fighting Stephen Thompson, who's a karate specialist, a kickboxing specialist, and who struggles on the ground, I definitely think Buckley could land takedowns and grind his way to a decision. I think Buckley could hurt or knock out Thompson, who's now 41 years old or something like that. So I get why Buckley is loved in this spot, and I get why you would want to target Buckley on DraftKings. But I guess my main take here is that Thompson is being a bit undervalued because he's looked really poor in recent losses, but those losses have come against Shavkat Rakhmonov, who's going to fight for the title next, and Bilal Muhammad, who is the current champion, and Gilbert Burns, who is an elite grappling fighter in this division. So getting out grappled by Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad and Shavkat Rakhmonov, it's just not really comparative to Joaquin Buckley in any form. And Buckley is still the type of guy to dive in on a double leg and get you down, but Buckley doesn't have great control and Buckley doesn't have great submission grappling. So I'm just not at all confident that Buckley is going to hold Stephen Thompson down for 12 out of 15 minutes. And if these guys strike, Thompson can beat him. Thompson is a really technical kickboxer, and he's more experienced than Buckley. And yeah, he's been hurt here and there, and he's been knocked out occasionally, and he's old, but Buckley's been knocked out in 3 of his 4 UFC losses by worse competition, by Kevin Holland, who Thompson beat the crap out of, by Alessio Di Chirico, who is not in the UFC, and by Chris Curtis, who I don't think super highly of. So I think Thompson is a clear path to being competitive and a clear path to winning if he can keep the fight standing. It's still a little bit risky from a DraftKings perspective because without the knockout, Thompson's just not going to score that well. But I also think because of his recent form, Thompson won't be very popular. He'll carry leverage against Joaquin Buckley, and I think he has sneaky knockout upside compared to his inside distance line, which is pretty poor. So at 7.4K, it's a risk, but I do think there's some upside and leverage on Stephen Thompson against Buckley, specifically if he can keep the fight standing, and he interests me this week from a salary perspective. All right, finally, my matchup of the week. This one is easy for me. I'm going with Ryan Spann versus Ovince St. Preux. It is an absolutely disgusting fight. Spann is minus 241, OSP plus 201, minus 425 to end inside the distance. Spann's 9.2K, OSP is 7K, and Spann is an early finisher. Spann has some power in his hands. He can win by early knockout, or he jumps on a guillotine, and that's kind of about it. Otherwise, he can be out-volumed, he can be out-grappled, he can be hurt, and he's now lost 3 in a row, 2 of those 3 inside the distance, fighting OSP, who is also an aging veteran, doesn't really produce a lot of offense. A guy who I've never really been a fan of, but suddenly in his last fight against Kennedy Nzechukwu landed 143 significant strikes over 15 minutes. And that's, more significant strikes than he had landed in his previous 5 fights combined. So basically, I think Spann has legitimate early finishing potential. In OSP's last 3 losses, it's been a round 1 KO, a round 2 KO, and a round 2 KO. And I think Spann could definitely knock him out early. Spann has really strong inside distance metrics, and I think the public is going to be a little bit scared off of him because he's lost 3 in a row and because he's priced in a range with Cesar Almeida, Alex Pereira, and Kayla Harrison, who people are going to want to prioritize. So I really like Spann in that sense. And OSP is probably my favorite punt on the slate because he has finishing upside. If he can just survive the first few minutes against Ryan Spann, he could out-volume him over the distance, he could out-grapple him, and he could knock him out. And he's 7K on a card where there's probably not going to be many big underdog scores. I like the savings there. I like the upside on both fighters. Very strong chance this fight ends inside the distance one way or the other, and it's a fight I want to be exposed to pretty heavily for that reason. And that's going to do it for this week's UFC Quick Picks. Thank you so much for the support. You can follow me on Twitter, Brett Appley, +T+P. Establish the run for all your DraftKings needs. Just got done with an hour, 45-minute podcast with my guy, Gordo Gambles, talking over every single fight on the slate. So feel free to check out our content there, breakdowns, projections, all that good stuff on establishthedrun.com. Until then, best of luck this week, and we'll talk to you all soon. Peace.